The billionaire arrived early, not to surprise his fiancée, but because an uneasiness he could not name had been sitting in his chest all morning, growing heavier with every mile. He stepped through the iron gates of the old family house and froze as the sound of a bucket sloshing echoed across the courtyard, followed by a sharp splash and a small cry. What he saw next cracked something deep inside him, something money had never been able to protect. His elegant fiancée stood with a plastic bucket in her hands, her face tight with disgust, as filthy water streamed down the worn shoulders of his aging mother and soaked the thin dress of his little daughter, who clutched her grandmother's hand in confusion and fear. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and standing up for those who cannot protect themselves, take a moment right now to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs a reminder that compassion still matters, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that touch the heart. For a moment, time seemed to slow as the billionaire watched from the shadows, unseen, his heart pounding louder than the city traffic beyond the walls. His mother, once strong and proud, now stood hunched, her gray hair plastered to her face, her eyes lowered not in shame but in quiet endurance. She had raised him alone after his father's sudden death, scrubbing floors and sewing clothes late into the night so he could dream bigger than their circumstances. And now, after all his success, after the towers and headlines and fortunes, she was being humiliated in his own home. Beside her, his daughter trembled, too young to understand cruelty, old enough to feel its sting, her small shoes sinking into muddy water as it pooled around them. The fiancée's resentment had not appeared overnight. She had smiled perfectly at charity events and posed lovingly for cameras, but behind closed doors, her impatience with the past had grown. She disliked the modest habits of the woman who refused expensive gifts and preferred simple meals. She saw the child not as family but as an inconvenience, a reminder of a life before luxury. In her mind, the old house needed cleansing, and so did the people who did not fit her polished image. What began as cold words became neglect, and neglect quietly transformed into cruelty when she believed no one important was watching. The billionaire felt anger surge, but beneath it lay something heavier, guilt. He had promised himself that wealth would shield the people he loved from pain, yet he had been absent, distracted by deals and deadlines, trusting the wrong person with the most precious parts of his life. He remembered his mother's hands guiding his as a boy, teaching him how to write his name, how to be gentle, how to stand up when it mattered. He remembered his daughter's laughter when he carried her on his shoulders, the way she believed her father could fix anything. Standing there, unseen, he realized this was the moment that would define not his empire, but his character. Rain clouds gathered overhead as if the sky itself sensed the tension. The fiancée poured the last of the dirty water onto the ground with a sharp motion, muttering to herself, unaware that the man whose name opened doors across the world was watching her true self unfold. The mother bent slowly to wipe her granddaughter's face with the edge of her soaked shawl, whispering comfort without complaint, choosing dignity over confrontation. That quiet strength broke the billionaire more than any insult ever could. He stepped forward then, his footsteps firm against the stone, the sound cutting through the courtyard like a verdict. What followed was not a scene of shouting or spectacle, but of truth finally exposed. The power imbalance shifted in an instant. The woman who had felt untouchable shrank under the weight of being seen, truly seen, for the first time. The billionaire did not need words to understand what had happened, and she did not need excuses to know they would not be enough. In that moment, the house that had felt cold and divided began, slowly, to breathe again, as if relieved that the silence had been broken. The days that followed were difficult and humbling. The billionaire cancelled meetings, ignored ringing phones, and stayed home, tending to scraped knees and brewing tea the way his mother once did for him. He listened to her stories, stories of loneliness and patience, of praying that her son's success would not cost him his soul. He apologized in actions rather than speeches, repairing what he could and accepting what could not be undone. His daughter, still wary, slowly smiled again, reassured by his presence and the warmth returning to the house. News traveled fast in their world, but the billionaire did not rush to control the narrative. He let go of the engagement quietly, firmly, understanding that love without respect is just a performance. The fiancée left with her designer bags and shattered expectations, while the old house filled with something far more valuable than luxury: safety. The mother planted flowers in the courtyard where dirty water had once pooled, and the child helped, her laughter mixing with birdsong as new life took root in the soil. Weeks later, the billionaire stood in that same courtyard, watching his mother and daughter water the blooming flowers together. The past could not be erased, but it had been transformed. He had learned that arriving early had saved him from arriving too late, that success means nothing if it blinds you to suffering, and that the true measure of a man is how fiercely he protects the vulnerable when it costs him comfort and pride. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the power of compassion and accountability, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel so these stories can reach even more hearts. Before the ending, we have one special request for you. Please comment below and tell us what kindness means to you, or share a moment when you stood up for someone who needed you. The billionaire never forgot that morning, not as a wound, but as a lesson carved into his life. Wealth returned, deals resumed, but his priorities had shifted forever. In choosing his mother's dignity and his daughter's safety over appearances and convenience, he found something far richer than fortune. And in a world that often looks away, he became someone who arrived early, stayed present, and chose love when it mattered most.